Ever wonder how that kid from The Shining got on in later life? Well, now's the time to find out. Here are 19 reasons to read Dr. Sleep. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is a place where I'm taking you through the works of Stephen King in chronological order and giving you 19 reasons to read every single one of his books. And every so often I throw out some specials as well, including my bottom 10 least favourite Stephen King works. Do go and check them out. Have a click around my channel if you've not been here before, see what you find, and if you like what you see, maybe hit subscribe so you don't miss any videos in the future. In this video, we're covering King's second book from 2013, Dr. Sleep. I'm going to give you 19 reasons to read this one, and I'll cluster any spoilers together at the end and give you warning in case you haven't read this yet and you want to dip out without having anything spoiled for you. So, let's jump into 19 reasons to read Dr. Sleep. You guessed it. So let's start with the big one. Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining. Yes, The Shining, one of the best loved horror books of any author of all time. We're catching up with Dan Torrance, who now just goes by Dan, in his 40s, a recovering addict who works in a hospice using his shine to help people have a peaceful death. But then some vampires turn up and these vampires feed off people with the shining and it all goes a bit crazy. But let's face it, you were in a sequel to The Shining, right? So this one being a sequel is pretty big news. King doesn't really do sequels, or at least at this point in his career, he hadn't done so. If you take out The Dark Tower, which is essentially one fucking huge book broken up into chunks, the only sequel he'd done at this point was Black House, the sequel to The Talisman, both of which he wrote with Peter Straub, and both of which regular viewers around here will know suck. This one does not suck though. This is a more than worthy sequel to a quite fantastic original. So King started bouncing the idea around for this back in 2009, and as I mentioned in the Wind Through the Keyhole video, he actually put this to a vote with his fans between whether they wanted to see him write Dr. Sleep or Wind Through the Keyhole. And this one won by a mere 49 votes. So it's no surprise really that King did end up writing both of them. And hey, King fans were always going to be down for a sequel to The Shining, weren't they? This one is also partly inspired by a real life cat called Oscar, who could allegedly work out when people were going to die. That's where we get Azzy, the cat on the front of this, and the character in this book. Azzy is a cat in the hospice where Dan Torrance works, and if Azzy strolls into your room and jumps on your bed, you're fucked. I mean, by nature of being in a hospice, you're kind of fucked anyway, but if the cat turns up, you're really fucked. And then when Dan Torrance walks through the door, well, see you later. So let's try and get into the hook of this one a little bit more. I've kind of covered where Dan is at, but the other key character you need to know about in this one is a girl called Abra Stone, who is born in 2001 and has the shine big time. There's a bunch of events in her childhood that show she's got the shine big time, but it's when she happens to witness from thousands of miles away the horrific torture of a young boy called Bradley Trevor by that group of vampires, the True Knot, that she makes herself known to the True Knot. They realise who she is and what power she has, and they want her. And from that point on, it all gets a bit leery. In the meantime, Abra has unwittingly made contact with Dan, and those two have to join forces to try and stave off the True Knot. So the True Knot then, a bunch of ageless vampires who find people with the shining, torture them, and then feed off the steam that torture produces. Sounds pretty cool, right? Yeah, but I didn't mention that they're basically all boomers who love their motorhomes and really crappy, pointless tech gadgets. I think King was going for the something normal and made to look malevolent, but they're also kind of really fucking annoying. Apart, that is, from their leader, Rose the Hat, who despite being all kinds of horrendous and evil, is beautiful, sexy and dreamy, and you will love her. Before we get to the True Knot and Abra and all of that stuff, we actually go through some of my favourite parts of this book, and that is catching up with Dan Torrance. And there are two key parts of this that I think are really powerfully written. In the first half, we see very young childhood Danny in the pretty immediate aftermath of surviving the Overlook events. And we see how this young child copes with such horrendous trauma. It's really powerfully written and includes a few old characters along the way. Then we see adult Dan in full addict mode. We see him stealing the last few bits of cash from his one-night stand after only just stopping his one-night stand's toddler from taking cocaine. It's a really powerful scene, and it feels like a lot of what King knew from his days of addiction are really worked into Dan's thought processes and Dan's internal monologues in those scenes. It is really, really fucking incredible writing. Now, the way in which those scenes balance out with Dan going on to have this career in a hospice and becoming their Dr. Sleep, it really does make those earlier scenes even more powerful and even more harrowing, especially as Dan keeps remembering little bits from them as we go through the book. Now, of course, there's an important location to mention here, and it's not spoiling anything to say that yes, this book does end up going back to Colorado and the site of a certain hotel that used to stand. So before we get to spoilers, let me give you one key takeaway reason to read this. It's really fucking good. Sequels are always a risk. Sequels to absolute classics are definitely a risk. But this one, King pulls it off. It's a different ride to The Shining, but it's excellent in its own way. Definitely check this one out. Okay, we're entering spoiler territory, so if you need to leave here, please do so and come back soon. So back to the True Knot. A great idea, for sure. But for me, kind of not that well done, apart from Rose the Hat. Honestly, I don't need to hear about boomers not being able to hold their fudge. Thank you very much. Although, that being said, the process that we get to see of somebody being transformed into a member of the True Knot, and also when members of the True Knot die, those scenes are very powerful. All the cycling and turning and agony, very creepy and very well done. Okay, the scene where the True Knot tortures Bradley Trevor, one of the most harrowing fucking things you will ever read. If you've seen Mike Flanagan's 2019 adaptation of this, you'll know that scene is rough. Reading that scene on the page makes the movie version look like something out of a kid's TV show. So, Jack Torrance, or at least the ghost of Jack Torrance, turns up to help save the day at the end. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I kind of like Jack being there, but I could have done with him just talking to Dan and not being so involved in the end. But that might just be me. Let me know what you think of the ending in the comments. Something, again, I'd be keen to hear your views on, but something for me I didn't need was the fact that Abra and Dan are actually related, because Abra's mum is Dan's half-sister. Not really necessary, thanks. So I mentioned earlier that in the first parts of the book we get to see some old characters, and the one you will love to see again is Dick Halloran. He's there teaching young Danny Torrance how to cope with the ghosts of the Overlook, and he teaches him this mental technique to basically lock them in a box in his brain. And it's another one of those great images King uses around the brain, a bit like in Dreamcatcher, where he shows the brain to be this big archive, this big record of memories. It's a very, very cool way of representing what the brain can do. And as a process for Danny to learn to deal with these ghosts that are still haunting him, very effective. And it becomes a useful plot point towards the book's climax. Now, obviously, the big connection to other King work in this one is The Shining. But as my final reason here, I wanted to run through a bunch of other things I spotted. So bear with me because this list is quite lengthy. First of all, you're going to want to keep your eyes peeled for references to Castle Rock and Jerusalem's Lot. There are also nods to a toothpick being chewed, like Beeve from Dreamcatcher. There's a creepy doll that reminded me of both Desperation and the 1994 miniseries of The Stand. There's a man with an SS past, a bit like Apt Pupil. There's a mention of the boy band Round Here, who feature in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. There's talk of a book called Empty Devils, written by one Scott Landon from Lisi's story. But aside from all that, my favourite little reference here is a slightly more unusual one. We get some references to one Charlie Manx and Christmas Land, which both feature in the Joe Hill book Nosferatu, which incidentally Nosferatu references Pennywise, and Joe Hill, in case you didn't know, is Stephen King's son. Lots of family fun with the Kings in these books. So there we go, 19 reasons to read Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments, and let me know how you think it matches up to the original. If you enjoyed that video, there's plenty more on my channel. Do click around, see what you find, and hey, click subscribe if you like it, because then you won't miss any videos in the future. And if you want to come chat King at all on Instagram, I'm at Dave Musson, always happy to hear from you. Next up, in terms of the books, we're covering not one, not two, but 3 in one video. And we get to meet Holly Gibney. Yay.